My name is Matt Wendling, and I'm one of the principal trainers for Drill Team Dynamics. We travel the country working with cadet programs, helping them develop their drill and ceremony, as well as their competitive drill teams. We get asked the question a lot, how do you run a more effective practice? What do you do to keep everyone on track the whole time? So I wanted to just kind of take a moment and talk about some of the things that we found that are super effective. First and foremost, if you happen to be an instructor and you're watching this, I will just say that your presence on the drill deck really does make all the difference. The cadets kind of know where their instructor's priorities are based on the time that they spent. So that any time you spend with them, they're going to take to heart. The practice will be that much more effective. And I understand that school schedules and instructor schedules are very busy and there's a lot of priorities. But if you invest in being present with your cadets, I think you'll see that the practice process is just that much more effective. So let's talk about three things, because a really ineffective practice, one where not much is getting done, is kind of a symptom of the larger problem, so to speak. So the first thing we want to make sure we do from the very beginning of the season is set very clear goals. We want to get perhaps before the end of the previous season, or at least as soon as you can at the start of the new season, and bring all the returning folks together, and with the instructor present, with the cadet commanders present, talk about what the goals for the team are. Make sure that those goals are realistic, that they're attainable, that you can measure kind of your progress towards those goals as you go throughout the season. So you really want to make sure those are very clear. You probably want to print those out or write them down, or post them where they're really visible, so that the cadets coming into and out of the ROTC area can see what those goals are on a daily basis. In every practice, you want to start by reiterating what those goals are. You know, if your goal is simply to progress to the next level of competition in your area, that's totally fine. Make that your goal and make it something that all the cadets in the program are aware of constantly. The other part of the goal setting process is really the practice to practice piece. What we would do, and what we found to be very effective, is the cadet commander works with the instructor. And prior to every practice, the cadet commander's responsibility was to come up with the goals for the day. You can call them benchmarks, you can call them goals, the things that the team was going to have accomplished by the time they were dismissed from practice at the end of that particular day. Those goals were kind of workshopped back and forth between the instructor and the cadet commander to make sure that they were attainable in the span that we had, that they correlated and really supported the full season goals. And then we made sure that those goals were posted throughout the ROTC area, maybe on the armory door, on the classroom board, somewhere where everyone coming throughout the day could see, hey, we're going to get to practice today and we're going to work on column of files, and we're going to work on the first 45 seconds of the exhibition routine. Now, when the cadets are coming to practice, they really know and have an idea of what's going to be expected of them for that particular duration of time. That kind of leads into our second point, which is that you want to make sure to set very clear expectations about the behavior that occurs at practice. For instance, and keep them very simple. Ours were as simple as you were never talking, you were always running, and you were only working on the things that the team was working on in the moment. What that does, as you solidify these and make sure that all your new members kind of hop on board and understand by watching the returning members execute these expectations, what that does is it allows you to use those expectations in support of your goals. And it really kind of solves some of the major issues. For instance, a lot of teams will tell us, we would have gotten a whole lot done on our exhibition routine, except that everyone had to put their 2 cents into how the routine was being made. Well, if you look at the never talking expectation, you teach the team, well, there's a right way and a wrong way to inject your opinion. You put a fist in the air and wait to be recognized by the instructor or the cadet commander. If you're not recognized, put your hand down and you carry on with practice. The idea being you learn how to communicate your ideas, and you learn when is the appropriate time to communicate those ideas so that practice doesn't get bogged down, so to speak. The always running expectation was really key for us, because it meant that we were moving from point A to point B with urgency throughout the entire time we're practicing. That meant that if we had a 2-hour practice session, we weren't wasting time by moving from drill deck A to drill deck B, or wasting time, going to get water and then coming back and then having to get reset up. It's kind of another video all in itself. but we were always working with a sense of urgency and moving with a quickness that made sure that we were able to accomplish the goals that were set forth for the day. And again, we're communicating those constantly. Hey, why are we running everywhere we go? Well, because we have a lot to get done in a very short span of time. So setting the goals really and bringing those together with the expectations, they really kind of mesh well to create a good, effective practice environment. The last piece of the puzzle in our expectations was that we were only working on what the team was working on at the moment, which meant that a lot of the times your more advanced cadets, especially on the armed side of the house, they're a little bit more skilled. Maybe the practice is moving at a little bit slower pace than they're used to because you're training up new members, whatever it might be. The expectation that they were only working on what we were working on as a team was huge, because it meant that as opposed to going off in the corner and spinning the rifle, throwing aerials, doing rising suns and all sorts of cool stuff, they were focused on what the team was focused on. Every moment that a cadet focused on an exhibition move that wasn't part of our exhibition routine was a moment where, yes, they might have been improving on their own, but they could have taken that time and refocused it on improving a part of the card that they were working on helping somebody else that was struggling. So we really made sure that throughout practice, the only activity that was taking place was within the bounds of the goals that we had set for that day. We found that worked very well in keeping everyone on track. And that kind of leads into the third point, and perhaps the most important or the most visible point, which is that you have to keep the team moving. There's got to be energy from the cadet commander. Cadet commanders, if you're watching this, you should go home from practice exhausted every day, because your energy level is always going to be reflected in the team, but always just with that little gap where they're a little bit behind you. So you need to push that energy through the roof to make sure that their energy comes up to match yours. It also means that you're never standing in one place for too long. Drill is kind of an activity where there's a lot of small things to look for. There's a lot of things that are very specific. And yes, we need to train those things. Yes, we need to get into the nitty-gritty of the exact foot placement and angles on the facing movements. But at the same time, if you allow the team or the block of cadets you're working with to remain stagnant in one position, their minds are going to go everywhere. When you've lost the mind and they're not physically moving and they're not physically engaged, that leads to the boredom and the lack of bearing, which is usually a lack of engagement, not necessarily a lack of bearing. And so you want to keep the team moving all the time. It might be as simple as doing a rep facing one direction, working on the nitty-gritty things that you need to work on, and then having the team run across the floor to the other side of the gym and fall in facing a different direction, just to get them changing the pace that they're operating at. If we stand still for too long, and yes, that is a component of nitty-gritty drill team training, but if we stand still for too long and let the brain space out and go elsewhere, now we're kind of in a situation where the talking, the lack of bearing or the lack of attention to what's being instructed, where all that sort of comes into play. So making sure that the energy level is high, the team is constantly moving from point A to point B, and remember that always running expectation, that plays into it. If we saw the team was getting bored or frustrated, or we could just read from their body language, mentally they were clicking out, we may have them simply change locations, or we may have them transition to a different part of what we're working on and then come back to what it is that we had hoped to start with, just to keep their mental focus where it needed to be. When the mental focus goes, you'll start to see the problems that really come along with an ineffective practice. But I think that by keeping the team moving, that by keeping the team engaged in what it is they're doing, you're going to see far, far better results.